else. He was a man who appeared comfortable in his own skin, a man at home in the world while restlessly seeking to improve himself and his country. These are kinds of things that we'll learn in this course that adhere to the idea of a gentleman, something he bent his mind toward achieving, the status of a gentleman. But many of these other things sort of carry over into this kind of growing and changing and adapting world, which his life sort of overlapped. Now, for all of that, really understanding Franklin's life and understanding the man for who he was is a daunting challenge. He's a man of many dimensions and many layers, a man who had many, many different interests. And surprisingly, he was at times very reticent. As a printer and an editor, he had to publish views from across the spectrum on political and religious and cultural and economic issues. His willingness to sort of throw himself into debate on those issues and really make his views known to other people complicated his role as an editor, a person who's and a printer, someone who's responsible for bringing all of these ideas out into the public. If you recall, Franklin was fond of writing anonymously. He sometimes took up positions that he himself didn't hold in order to stir up debate. Franklin also wrote parody and satire, sort of what we would call trolling today. And in that vein, he cherished intellectual playfulness and the give and take of arguments. So sometimes it was hard to kind of know what he really believed and what he really felt about an issue. So in some ways, he's kind of unknowable for all of his published writings and his voluminous correspondence. He wasn't exactly a sphinx, but he wasn't exactly an open book either. Now, Franklin lived at the historical intersection between one kind of society that was fading away and another kind of society that was just emerging. Now, on the surface, it would be easy to map this intersection on top of the geography of the old world versus the new world, right? You'd have England and France on the one hand, and then America on the other. But keep in mind that the old and the new were mixed together in colonial societies. And in Europe, many of the trends that were shaping the modern world could be found in embryonic form. So as a boy, Franklin recalled much later, he had a strong inclination for the sea, a sort of a wanderlust. While he was still a teenager, he left his home in Boston and went to New York and then on to Philadelphia. At the age of 18, he went to London and lived there for 2 years. Eventually, he would make his life in Philadelphia, the most cosmopolitan city in America in the middle of the 18th century. For most of the last 30 years of his life, he lived abroad in England and in France. So my point is that he learned to be comfortable in a wide variety of settings, in the workshop, the legislative assembly, in the colonial tavern, and in the parlors of Paris socialites. He was a person who could span all these different cultures, old world cultures, new world cultures, urban cultures, right? Cultures associated with the English country manner, right? A kind of much more traditional kind of society. Now, it would be a mistake to say that Franklin was just a man of many faces. It's more fair to say that Franklin learned to make his way in the world as he found it. The fact is, the 18th century Atlantic world was a swirl of cross currents that were profoundly transforming customary social and political and economic arrangements. Franklin maintained a life ethic of getting along while striving to improve his economic and social and political position. This ethic required him to be adaptive and flexible at a time when old institutions were changing and new institutions were emerging. We could say that Franklin was present at the creation of a new world and had much influence over the shape and the direction of that new world. When the French intellectual Mirabeau heard of Franklin's death in 1791, he went to the National Assembly. This was a new institution created by the French Revolution in 1789. And he said, "Franklin is dead." I'm going to quote from Mirabeau's speech. "The genius that freed America and poured a flood of light over Europe has returned to the bosom of the divinity. The sage whom 2 worlds claim as their own, the man for whom history of science and the history of empires contend with each other, he held without a doubt a